Okay, this time I think I'll forego the intro here, really, but we'll just look at a picture to start it out with. Some of these I do is more of an audio file, it almost seems, because I don't show as much or interject as much pictures as I would like to in some places. There's just sometimes when I make a statement where I ought to, right at that moment, show you a picture and all of a sudden be like, aha! What we're looking at here is a depiction of creation, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to go back into the starting of creation and go back through it kind of in a quick way if I can, you know me. And we're going to try to get past part 1 and 2, which I've done at least 4 different videos on, and aspects of about 5 different videos on, and a lot of those I hit it from a different direction, showing you connections. One of the more recent ones is Greek connections, but just before that I show you where a lot of it comes from is Sumerian myths. In fact, I did 3 that show connections that are in there, from Inanna and the Halupa tree, which had the snake in it, Tales of Gilgamesh, all kinds of things, even the flood having come from the Sumerian story, and the lament of Inanna and things like that. But let's try to stick on this here a little bit if we can. Let's go back to this place, because where I'm at is a place called Bible Hub. It's at BibleHub.com. It's one word, Bible Hub, and you can see the Bible. And you can actually pick all the different variations that you want to here of where it comes from. You can, New Living Testament, all the way back to like Septuagint and the original Hebrew, although whenever it does, it'll show you the Hebrew words and the way they phonetically sound out, but at the same time, it'll actually show you what those words mean. Sometimes it comes across as almost like broken English, and that is literally the way it was. And it's been transposed a few times, of course. We're looking at the King James Version here, but in the transcription from different languages and so on, and passing up, because they were taught thesaurus-wise, pretty much, what each word meant, and then so they would put in other words that kind of mean the same thing. But after you get about 15, 20 of those in a few paragraphs, all of a sudden the story takes on a different flavor. And as we'll find here, the ideals that people have in a modern day look at it, and of course it changed, of course, in the Christian viewpoint of it too later, and then later again, and then in our modern day, and how different that is than really the allegory that this story was meant. I often make the joke that if you can get past the point of a woman grew from a rib and ate from a magic tree because a talking snake told her to, and you still don't think this is allegory but something that actually happened, then you may be a little bit harder to reach. So in this story, it always starts out with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. But I've shown where those words in Hebrew are actually taken from Sumerians, and it's cognate to Tohu and Bohu, which are Tiamat and Bahamut, and later tells that it's, of course, connected to saltwater and freshwater, and how the mingling of the two created certain creatures and so on. But they take that myth and put it into a different idea, and it's just thrown in there. The oddity is it's thrown in there. Whether it's even oppositive ideas, the concept is still there, so he can show you that people that when they were in the Babylonian captivity, they learned a whole lot about a tale that supposedly comes way before their tale originally, and of course they would have been Canaanites and so on. And I'm sure with studying the allegorical rules that went along with this, which all the mystery cults were into, in fact, whenever you got initiated up through the ranks, you were expected to write something like this, like a gospel, that contained at least 2 things twisted together, but you're supposed to make some sense out of it, and the way it works, they think, science-wise, kinda in the modern world. Or even in the case of the Bible, where the Greeks knew that the world was round by then, and of course, it was hundreds of years before the Bible was written down, but it still describes it in a way that says there are 4 pillars and there's this bubble and we live in a giant snow globe. Kind of a flat earth model, by the way. And the underworld is just whenever the sun goes around the other side. So some people also figured out, but they killed them usually, that the sun was in the center of everything and everybody's going around it. In fact, if you look at the most ancient Proto-Indo-European beliefs, this idea and concept that we're going through here is pretty much straggled on from that, from a time before we had any writing, and it just went off of old folklore. And it seems so connected, somewhat. Once you see a few of these allegories, it starts to show itself a little bit better, and then all of a sudden you can say, well, here's a story about blah, 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 blah. And you go, well, okay, it's not the one you think for the Bible, it's this story over here, ha, ha, ha. And let me explain it to you, and you go through it. Anyhow, let's see if I can get through this. So then he says, let there be light, and of course, the sun, it all began with sun worship, as I've shown hundreds of times, and all of these things here are, all these religions that we know of are all based on sun worship and seasons and so on. And people would say that that must only begin at farming then and stuff, and then everything changed. Well, it did change, but they had that astronomical beliefs way before then, and we've proven it all the way from Lascaux caves at nearly 30,000 years old, where they have Taurus, and it's marked out with dots, which are the stars, and someone figured out, due to its angle and where it sits at, that if the wall was made of glass as opposed to stone that's on, that you would actually see Taurus fly through the heavens and be right there, almost like you could take a picture of it at a certain time of year. Has the Pleiades on it and so on too. So there were people watching this. Of course, it says the ancient Chaldeans had, for over 200,000 years easily, had been studying the stars because they had records that go way back or whatever. But what's the weird thing there is, like, just like we have astronomical programs now, and you can figure forward in time where solar eclipses happen and so on like that, and it actually becomes pretty easy for these people once they start to do this all the time. It just comes to them like easy math, you know? But in doing so, they can also go backwards in time and tell you and verify, because they know it's written here and written there, and then go back to where it's not written anymore, but it was still happening, giving you an idea of the longevity and long, deep time. Like the Sumerians, whenever they say something twice, which you'll hear a few times in here and this too, it's something that they put emphasis on. Like whenever they say far, far away, something as simple as that is actually not meaning far away, which in your mind you think of, wow, that's a few states over, or how far are we talking? Far, far away, and that's a long ways away. It can be used to describe something that's on the other side of the planet or at the edge of the earth at the time, to the ends of the earth, if you will. So in this, of course, day, and of course day and deus, do, more Latin, masculine, you can end up getting a God's name out of this just based on the fact of day. And then the opposite of that, or yin and yang, which you usually see as black and white, is day and night. And there's a god of the underworld too. I guess it's a good time to mention here, but isn't it funny, God got the, or the supposed God we're talking about in the Bible here, is got the raw end of the deal. For somehow he gets this Satan, which we're supposed to believe was just one of the angels, which he should be able to just turn into a pillar of salt, just like, you know, any other magic tricks that's going on right here. All of these first days and everything else is really him invoking somewhat of magic tricks. And then he actually does a Golem spell and takes and makes a clay statue like some kind of Greek thing, like in the ancient Clash of Titans, where it's just a little clay statue, and whenever they change that one into an evil creature, they just mold it around and it looks like it. Or when he takes the other one and just sets it up or whatever, it's just like a little chess piece. Just a little flowered, crayed thing, or maybe it would be made out of stone or crystal or something, if it were that neat. But no, it's just clay and mud. But then again, pottery goes back tens of thousands of years too. Well, of course, that's, like the Venus of Willenfeld or whatever. It has extreme lineage to it, and it's fired clay pottery and then covered with red ochre and so on, in a ritual that was apparently going on with the idea of Venus and the mother and creation and things from way, way back. But that's for another video, and I'm sure I've mentioned it in a few. So then there's that firmament in the midst of the waters. So in this idea, space is water. And people have tried to make all kinds of things about it, but you can't breathe in space and you can't breathe underwater. Of course, they're the exact opposite of it. Water has some air into it, but it's the way it's hooked up. Fish are hooked up to be able to breathe in the water. But it separates it whenever it does so. That makes this snow globe situation, and he called the firmament heavens. So the evening and the morning of the second day, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land. So that's why there's oceans and why there's not. But then it's not gathered in one place because it's all in the frost and things like that. Strangely, when we look at a firmament idea, you can find it in a few tablets of the Sumerians where somebody apparently went far enough north, and a couple of times they also went up in mountains, to where you get to the point and the water there is solid and firm. You get a firmament idea, and you can take the same picture of the snow globe and say there's a firmament above and a firmament below, and it's separated by land and water. And if you look at the globe of the Earth spinning around, you see a North Pole and a South Pole, Antarctica, and you see the center of it where there's land and there's sea. But it's not what they're talking about, definitely in this book. People have gone, you look up Flat Earth Bible and you'll see enough people talking about it to make you sick listening to it. Anyhow, so they're all gathered together in one place, and he brings forth every, seeds or whatever else, but he doesn't have a son yet. Well, weird thing about this, and a lot of people know this already, that this is actually two stories twisted together, because right here in the first, he creates man and woman, and they, like there's a bunch of people running around, and then all of a sudden in the next part of the story, he has to create Adam, and he's the first one. Now, is this something special? Are there some kind of hominids running around, and then all of a sudden there's Cro-Magnon? It's what we'd associate it with today, but the timeline that they try to give here doesn't fit. And of course, things happening in a day, we do realize that whenever the sun turned on, let there be light, that fired the whole engine of our solar system up, which was in darkness before that, and that's what we believe now. Seriously. And that kicked in a bunch of things, trying to go in and out or whatever, even more, and congealed a lot of stuff and turned into asteroids, and those went around pummeling everything and giving different stuff to places, and we believe a large portion of our water came from that, from a lot of little glaciers falling into our atmosphere, and although a lot of them would burn up, it would give moisture, and that would fall as rain and so on like that. Happened multiple times. Whether it was that or maybe even actually a comet hitting us, which we believe kind of happened too now. In fact, that we believe that's how we got our moon. Strangely, that goes with the Sumerian story again also, and how Kingu, whose head became pale and then forever looks upon Kia in the story, which is Earth, Mother Earth, it always looks on because it's tidally locked, only facing at us from this man in the earth, or the man in the moon. And that person's name in the oldest story we have about it is Kingu. And that goes back to a Tiamat Muhammad story and everything too, but I've said enough about that in a few other videos. Let's see if I can get through this. I'm almost at 15 minutes here and I haven't even really touched the surface. So, he says, let there be lights in the firmament and heavens to divide the day and night. Let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years. So here we go with astrotheological situation again, and it's supposed to be for signs and seasons and all this stuff, so these people were well aware. Well, we already knew the seasons, that's what I'm saying, before agriculture. They already had figured out whenever certain times were coming, and they watch flock of birds, just like we start to see ducks and geese every year fly north, and we're like, here it comes. And whenever they come back, we go, here it goes. But we can also look at that enough times and follow a lunar calendar and so on and count the amount of days. And lo and behold, we'll find that it happens around the same time every year, although a groundhog sees a shadow and this, that, and the other, and you might have an early frost. And there's no way of predicting that, but all these shamans really try to. And that was way before this time stuff. But if you think that that magic shaman thing went away with way back then and it's not in the Bible, everything that we're discussing today has actually come off as a magical story. You can think of Disney's Mickey and Fantasia, where he's boom, 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 making things happen, or John Cleese and Monty Python, if you want, and making these things happen. In fact, he's so powerful, he doesn't have to use this, that, and the other, and spark powder, ha-ha. He just speaks it into being in certain cases. In other cases, he has to do the Golem story of Adam, the Golem spell of Adam, and make a man, like a little voodoo doll type thing, and then he has to breathe the breath of life into it. That's a Golem. Right, and the same concept is Mummy, too, where they get opening of the mouth and stuff like that. And we've talked about that, so you may be able to make a connection there, too. Hope this mic's coming across good. It's a little wideband mic as opposed to the one that we've been used to before, but there is a fan going on near me. Anyhow, so abundance of living creatures, and if you'll look at the 6 days of creation that they have here, what would they have is they start off things with waters and separations, and then trees, and then animals, and then it's what's the stuff they use, 1, 2, 3 again, back in that phase. And we get to the story where we end up trying to make, well, here in 2 places, by the way, I'm kind of skipping right over. It actually says the same thing twice, and then of course it keeps repeating after each one that he saw it was good and he went on, which is another like Sumerian motif to go like, oh, this is this, and this is this, and this is this, and so on. Just like you think of the 10 Commandments and so on, and laws and rules. Anyhow, but let us, which is plural, make man in our image, which our is plural.